Well, I can start off by introducing myself. So I introduced myself at the beginning of the summit, but once again, my name is Alejandra. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a student at the University of Oklahoma going into my senior year, and I am one of the co-founders for the Voto Latino chapter here on campus, and now I do work with the Carl Albert Center as a civic engagement fellow with Oklahoma Votes.
And my name is Kassie. I am the Curriculum and Research Coordinator at Campus Vote Project. I am also a 6th year PhD student at the University of Texas at Austin. So we're like friendly rivals in this space as well with OU. And I helped reestablish Texas Votes, which is a nonpartisan student organization at UT Austin, which has really helped transform voter engagement on our campus from like a pretty unhealthy atmosphere to a super collaborative and high achieving group of students who have, for 2 election cycles in a row, seen voter engagement increase by over 14% from 2012 to 2016 and over 30% from 2014 to 2018. And when I started, we only had 1 returning member for Texas Vote. So although I didn't create the organization, I basically recreated it from the ground up with this 1 returning member. Since there are really 4 of us, Ryan and Abigail, would you like to introduce yourselves? Because I think this is going to be a little more chill than a big presentation might be.
Sure. My name is Ryan Ridge. I go to Murray State College. I'm an ambassador there, and then also a vice president of SGA. But I'm also a junior and in the physical therapy assistant program, so that's basically it.
And then my name's Abigail, and I'm a psychology and philosophy major with a Spanish minor. I do work with in social psychology labs for the most part, and one of my emphases is motivation. So I thought this would be pretty cool. But I'm doing this through the Student Volunteer Center at our at Oklahoma State University to see if we can get a civic engagement branch a little more established there.
Well, I think you are both in the right place. If at any point you have questions for us, like I said, I think we were really prepared for doing a full-on big presentation, but I think we should probably move to more conversational, if that's okay with you, Ali.
Yeah.
Okay. We can get to the right screen. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so I will start off our conversation and just talking a little bit about the brainstorming aspect that goes into wanting to create an organization. Whenever, as I'm talking through the presentation, I'm going to be mentioning a lot Voto Latino because that was my experience and the what I can bring to the table. So with VL, we started off by asking ourselves these different questions. So the first one was, what are we wanting to accomplish with this organization? So a big thing it was a group of us who sat down and we were like, what is our community missing? What is an aspect that we're not really honing in on right now? And we ultimately decided that we want to do something around civic engagement and voter registration efforts, which is how we got to the second question. So are we trying to serve the overall campus community or a specific community on campus? And so originally we wanted to do basically just something OU specific. And then the more we spoke about it, the more we realized that we wanted to center our work in the Latinx community, which is why we chose Voto Latino. And so there are options in terms of how you want to create an organization. You can be an independent student organization. So on some campuses that might be a registered student organization. On OU's campus, you have to fall under SGA. And so that's an option, or you can serve under a campus department. So Oklahoma Votes here on campus is under the Carl Albert Center, which is like a campus department. And then for Voto Latino, our experience was that we decided we wanted to do a collegiate chapter of a national organization. So Voto Latino is a national organization that has chapters all over the US. And so we partnered with them because we saw the work they were already doing and we wanted to be a part of that organization and get the resources that they give. And so whether that was like information or just access to how to talk to people in our community, especially because we were experiencing a lot of conversations with large undocumented populations. And so Voto Latino was really helpful in navigating those conversations and figuring out what is the best approach to talking to our community. So, yeah.
So thinking through logistics, like how does this actually happen? What requirements does your university have for creating a student organization? At UT Austin, we have student organizations that are considered sponsored, and that means that they are sponsored by some kind of institution on campus, be it like an academic space, so Abigail, like your situation specifically, or student government, like what you're dealing with, Ryan. Or are you wanting to do what Alejandra did, which was work with an outside organization, and those are called registered student organizations at our campus, but like it's something different at every single campus. I, being a PhD student, I've been at 3 different universities that were very, 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 very different. Georgetown and UT Austin are completely different beast, and what you can do at each campus is different. So that's groundwork that you need to do. Are you required to get a faculty or staff sponsor? What do you want that individual to do for you? If you're sponsored by an institute, are they providing someone like a graduate assistant to help oversee what you're doing? So that was, for me, my role with Texas Votes was I was that graduate student who basically became voting mom, or like the subject matter expert on all things voting for all UT students, which was kind of an accidental happy mistake that happened for us. And so also, if you look and see if other students have tried to do what you are doing, and make sure that you're not like recreating the wheel when it's already been made, right? And so if there is an organization very similar to yours that you have in your head, figure out if there is a big difference or not. So I think a really important difference where we have very similar organizations on our campus, which is Hook the Vote, is our student government sponsored nonpartisan voter engagement org, and then Texas Votes is our Annette Strauss sponsored org. And so the huge difference is student government has so much turnover every single year that they're not able to keep very good continuity, whereas we have people who stick with us for years because we don't force people. It's not a forced out situation like some SG turnover can be. And additionally, what that also means is Texas Votes, because of who our sponsoring organization is, cannot do advocacy work, but Hook the Vote can. And so once we started really looking at like what the differences are, and there was like some unhealthy competition when I first got there, I was like, this is a problem. We both have like the same goal, but we can reach it in different ways. We were able to work with them and say like, here's this problem that we see. You guys should be working on this stuff. We'll be getting in the classrooms and doing the registration because we have professors who worked with us semester after semester at this point. But if you can make our lives easier by advocating on behalf of things that make voting easier for students, that goes such a long, long way. So kind of figuring out your niche, and if there are other orgs on campus, how you guys all fit together, because it doesn't need to be a competition. Although friendly competition is always fun, like who can register the most people on X day is always a good thing to do. Ellie, do you want to do this one?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, Ryan, go ahead.
So small that can you hear me?
Yeah, try again. Cut out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the thing is with our school, it's just like we're so small that we're a community college, and the only people that are really doing anything is ambassadors, and then SGA, they hardly do anything really, but the ambassadors are a big thing, and that's where we do all our registering and all that, and all we do is go set up a table right in front of the cafeteria and then people walk by, we try to get their attention, but it's hard sometimes. So I was wondering, like, different ways to, like, get people to come vote.
Yeah, I'm going to be super real with you. And like anytime you can offer free food, like students go crazy for that. So during summer orientation, when it's hot and we're all outside, when we're doing recruitment, we offer, what are they called? Capri Suns, which is like a hilariously popular thing that we never imagined would actually be popular and pretty cost effective. And a lot of our,
good.
right? You're like, I'm 5 years old again and I love it. And then the other things that have gone really well for us, I mean, we're in Austin, so breakfast tacos are like the it, right? Like,
yeah.
if we're doing morning things, it's breakfast tacos. If we're doing afternoon things, it's pizza. I know that's like such a simplistic way of looking at it, but if all you have the manpower for doing is tabling, little things like that, and sharing information about the fact that you're doing that, it's totally cool. You cannot give someone something for registering to vote. That's illegal. But you can give them something by coming to your table and learning about something. So if you have like a handout that's like, you know, a little postcard that's like, here are all these important election dates, and you give them that and the piece of pizza and then ask if they're registered to vote and they're like, no, you're like, let me get you registered at your current address, that's allowed. Does that make sense? I want to make sure we're not telling people to do illegal things, because that's bad. If you ever get more people, classroom voter registration, especially going into those rooms that have are like kind of required courses for a lot of students, is hands down, I think, for us, the most effective. We get so many people in such a short amount of time. And mind you, like, we're doing this at a huge school, right? But I can't imagine it not also working that same way. I didn't go to a community college, but my undergrad was super tiny. I think we had like 6,000 students total, and most of those were night school students, so maybe 2,000 day school students. And I think that we could have gone into classrooms. Do you have athletes at your school?
Yes, we have basketball, soccer, baseball, and then softball. Yeah.
I've also found on campuses that are pretty athletic centric, which where I went to undergrad was, kind of targeting those groups first and asking them to help you is also good.
Gotcha.
Just because if you want to think about where the most people are, where they're required to be, it's students in classrooms and athletes at practice. Those are kinds of like the spaces where people are required to be. If you're, for example, if you are also with like a religious institution, you know, with like required chapel, which I know undergrads at Georgetown had to do, having people outside doing voter registration before and after chapel and working with, for us, it was our Jesuit ministers, or not ministers, you guys know what I'm trying to say though, working with them to like say that this is important to them was also very impactful.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I can take this next one. As Kassie was talking about, like working through logistics and stuff like that, don't be afraid to like lean on mentors and other people who have done this kind of work before, or even people who have started student organizations on your campus. Like, talk to them, figure out what that process was like, because that's definitely an aspect that we won't be able to tell you a lot on, because it's really specific to your specific college campus. So talk to like student affairs, whoever is in charge of that area for your school. For us, like we have a student life office at OU, and we sat down with the director of student life and we're like, we want to make this happen. How do we do this? And they walked us through options on campus. And so rely on those people. They're going to be great mentors and allies throughout the process, because then they're going to know about your organization and they're going to think about you for different opportunities. Like whenever the census was coming up before COVID, when we were supposed to be on campus, on April 1st, we were going to have a big census day. And because we took that moment to talk to our director of student life before we started our organization, he thought about us as an organization to take over the OU Instagram, which is something that would have happened if we were still on campus. So those relationships will come back and they'll be really helpful as your organization grows and is on campus longer.
So I'm going to be straight up and say that defining nonpartisanship is such a hard thing to do that it was my original idea for my dissertation. And then I thought that would like be too difficult to do for a dissertation and didn't do it. And now my dissertation topic is something different. So I just want to be super straight up with you guys. There is no like clear like definition of nonpartisanship. And so what you have to do as an organization is decide what nonpartisan means for you, and also means for your sponsoring organizations. So for Texas Votes, nonpartisanship was not originally defined by our organization. It was actually defined by the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, who sponsors our organization. It might be defined by you, by your university, because if you are overseen by the university, they're gonna be like, well, we don't want you handing out, you know, the UDems or the college Republicans like flashcards on who they think you should vote for, right? And so what does this mean? So for us at Texas Votes, it means that we cannot do any advocacy work. Frankly, it gives us more access to spaces when we are not seen as controversial. It's easy to argue in the state of Texas. I'm going to think it's pretty similar in Oklahoma, that even fighting for something like voting rights gets turned into something partisan, although I wholeheartedly believe that it shouldn't be a partisan issue. It has definitely become, especially student voting rights, has absolutely become a partisan issue in Texas. We have partners who are fighting for that because we know that it needs to happen, but we've come to realize that there are so many professors, and this is what my dissertation is about, there are so many professors who are so nervous to talk about politics and voting in their classrooms that like, if you are part of a group that does this advocacy, that they're probably not going to invite you in to let you like register those classrooms to vote. So I was talking to Alejandra when we were ideating over this panel, and I kind of explained that like you need to have, especially in places where voting is very volatile and voting is for young people is in general is seen as partisan, you really have to have that like foundational group on campus whose role is just to ensure that all students who are eligible are registered and have the information that they need to vote, talking about like where your polling locations are, talking about things like what election hours are, do you have early voting, really foundational information, because A, a lot of people don't know that information in the first place, and B, it kind of provides you with the safety of like allowing more and more people to come to you to help. But if you already have that on campus, or you feel that's not a need that you have for your campus, or if you're on a campus where like that's not going to be seen as controversial in and of itself, like we have had, that's what we do straight up. That's what Texas Votes does. And we have had donors at our institute still claim that what we're doing is nonpartisan. So just to like put that into like perspective. Now, other groups, what they're doing is nonpartisan, and they're definitely doing really fantastic advocacy work. Frankly, like I was saying before, topics like voting rights are directly connected to the goals and impact of your work. And so Voto Latino is a really perfect example of that. We have some statewide organizations in Texas that also do this beautifully. So you have to decide together with your organization what that's going to look like. And we actually ended up writing that into our constitution. So we ask our members to kind of wear their Texas Votes hat when they're doing Texas Votes work, and then take that hat off. And if they are a member of a partisan group, wear that hat, but don't wear your Texas Votes hat at the same time. So we have to ask members not to wear their Texas Votes t-shirts when they're like going to their other meetings, or we ask them not to wear their partisan t-shirts when they're tabling on our behalf, because we need to make sure that students of all political beliefs know that they can feel comfortable coming to register in our space. I know this is like kind of a weird thing, and I have before talked about this topic for over an hour. Do you guys have any questions on this really quick and dirty explanation of that?
I guess one thing that I was kind of wondering about is, so we have several different organizations on campus. Like we have Young Democrats, Young Republicans, a couple of different groups like that. And we do have, like, our Student Union Activities Board, I think in 2018, organized a voter registration day and had like web information on the website. But so far I haven't been able to find like a nonpartisan organization specifically for like specifically dedicated to these things rather than like some other board that might try to incentivize voting or something in some way. So in y'all's personal experience, are there any advantages to having one of those kinds, like a group like that? Like if I went forward and like said, I want to, I want to create a group like this, what justifications could I provide to an administrator saying like, why do we need a separate organization when groups might already be interested in this work?
So, from my experience, I mean, last year alone, Texas Votes registered over 13,000 students. And then also we were kind of, I think maybe a good explanation of one of the core purposes that we fill on campus is that we facilitate the coalition of all organizations on campus who believe that voting is important. So we take a central role in that and help organize everyone. So it's one of the few spaces where UDEMs and college Republicans get together in a room and are like, they know our rules and are not gonna, like, we don't have to worry about a debate happening. Cause we're like, unless it's about the best way to get someone registered to vote. Like, because that's like not what our space is for. And I think at this point, both groups see that we respect both of them and like, we expect that kind of respect back. We'll talk about coalitions a little more later, but I think that is a really good reason for needing that. And I will also say there are a lot of students who are very intimidated by politics. And so many of our members, I mean, and this isn't like me guessing, this is things that they've told me, feel more welcome in our space because they like aren't really ready to, I guess, like out their political beliefs to anyone. But they do want to ensure people are participating. And so it's kind of a safe space. We tend to recruit a lot of freshmen and sophomores, and then we tend to recruit like seniors in their very last year who were part of these partisan groups and got burnt by their partisan groups. So there's a lot of like, if you do it right, a nonpartisan organization like Texas Votes or like Oklahoma Votes is like no drama, right? The drama is like trying to make stuff happen, but there's not drama between members. You're not like voting on who you guys are supporting in a race, right? There's like the internal politics. We don't really have internal politics. We like talk about being a big family. We like share pictures of our cats together, and then we eat lots of pizza and register lots of people to vote. That's kind of like the space that we fill. So we're kind of like, we kind of thrive on being like one of the least toxic organizations on campus. So we get a lot of like partisan group rejects who were like, I'm over that drama and I just want to be part of like getting people to vote. That's all I care about. So I think that like, oh, and we also have a ton of STEM members who join Texas Votes because I think that they're like not ready to go be like, super political, but they do know that it's important. And this feels like the like most welcoming space on campus for that. And then you guys kind of choose what you want to do beyond like voter registration. Like, are you going to advocate on behalf of voting rights or not? That's kind of your call. I have a feeling for you, it's going to also be the call of the department that you're working with. And I honestly, if you guys have to deal with anything like your state school as well, like we're constantly dealing with the fear of like being redlined for something that we've done. So like, you really don't want to make your government super angry. Straight up. So yeah, that's kind of my approach. Do you want to add anything, Ellie?
No, I think you touched on it. I was gonna literally say everything that you said basically, because my experience with Voto Latino, we are a nonpartisan organization, but at the same time, like we did a lot of advocacy work because we targeted a specific community. And then when I moved to Oklahoma Votes, like this past year, and now I'm a civic engagement fellow for them, I really see that Oklahoma Votes is kind of the center of the coalition and the people that are at the table and having these conversations. And it's really like there's no conversation about candidates and stuff like that. It's just like, okay, how can we reach students? What is this calendar going to look like throughout the year? Like who's doing what? And so I think Kassie really touched on it well, that having a central organization is going to help with the relationships on campus, and it's going to help students feel like they can become more involved. Because I've definitely heard from students that, oh yeah, I'm too scared to go up to like a college Republicans table or a Young Democrats table to like register to vote because I don't want people to know what my political party is. And I'm like, that's understandable. Like if you're not ready to have those open conversations, like politics are really stigmatized, and the conversations around it, people are like, no, we're not going to talk about that. And so this is new territory for a lot of students that are coming in as freshmen, and that need that outlet like Texas Votes or Oklahoma Votes. So I think it's really central to that.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was super helpful.
And I'm gonna volunteer Lauren or myself if you ever just need to talk about this. So I kind of helped Lauren when she was who you've been hearing from throughout the summit, when she was trying to figure out how to get Oklahoma Votes started, and we like really went through and talked about what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And so I would be happy through my job with Campus Vote Project to like help you think about that. I also think Lauren, if she has time, she's also incredibly busy, so she may not have time, would be another really incredibly helpful person, because I don't know, I know about the Oklahoma voting laws because I hang out with Oklahoma people, but your laws are very different than mine. So like key steps in Texas are like, be trained as a volunteer deputy registrar, which is like not a thing you have to worry about. So be happy about that. Or a thing that we don't have to do, but you guys need to do is like find a notary for your absentee ballots. Like not a thing I have to worry about. So I don't want to like forget an important step if I do help you.
Sure.
But I do want to help. I'm very happy to help.
Thank you.
Okay, so establishing leadership. Kind of once you had like that first phase of like, okay, this is what this is going to look like, you have to start thinking about who you're going to be bringing onto the team. And so thinking about the structure, a lot of times you have to ask yourself, what's missing from this team right now? You know, like I'm big picture kind of girl. I can do like logistics, administrative work in the background, but I can't do like a lot of PR stuff, like social media stuff. That's not for me. And so thinking about the kind of people that you need to bring on into the conversation. And then for us, when we were creating VL, we knew of people that were interested in voting stuff. And we were like, these are people that would want to do work and would probably be passionate about this organization. And so there's probably people around you that you might know that you could bring into those conversations and really help you mold the leadership of your organization. And then also being realistic and being like explicit about the time commitment is also another thing. I have noticed this on OU's campus. I don't know if this is a universal thing on campuses, but there tend to be a lot of campus leaders who are involved in different areas, and they're always super willing to help, which is great, but sometimes realistically they don't have the time. And so being real with people about like, this is what I need from you, this is what this time commitment is going to look like this is how often we're going to meet, is really important. Because if not, you could have people that really do care about the work that you're trying to do and doing civic engagement work, but that they don't have the time for it. And then that just ends up hurting your organization. I experienced that a lot when we first started VL. We had people that really cared about the organization, but they had too much on their plate and stuff just started slipping through the cracks. And we had to have some uncomfortable conversations about like, hey, if you're gonna remain with this organization, we need you to commit some more time. I mean, so starting off by doing that is gonna be really key to having those people really give some good time to your organization and helping to develop it. Because at first, a lot of the work that you're going to be doing is like molding your organization and figuring out what it's going to look like for years to come. And with that, establishing expectations. So one of my favorite things to do when establishing expectations is having a snowball fight for expectations. And so we will write our like expectations for one another on a piece of paper, and then we'll crumble it up and we'll all throw it into like the middle of the room. And once everyone's done, then there's like one person that goes around and they like pick them up and they like open up the pieces of paper and they're like, okay, this person put down respect. And then we talk about it and we talk about what that means to us. And so there are ways to do stuff that's going to be fun and have your team really interact. And so for my experience being in leadership positions, when you establish expectations at the beginning of the year, that's really helpful because it's something that you can look back at and you're like, okay, our team said we were going to do this. And if we're not doing that, then we need to talk about what we need to do to get there. And so I definitely recommend that, as well as thinking about long-term goals. So what leadership roles are essential to the success of your organization and the longevity of it. With Voto Latino, for the organization, you can mold the positions however you want. Like we had like a research chair, we had an outreach chair, but for sure in our organization, you always had to have a president, you always had to have a treasurer, because we needed somebody to manage the money and we needed somebody to oversee the organization as a whole. But the other positions were positions that you can mold and add at your discretion. So thinking about like which positions are really essential and need to be ones that in our constitution, we make sure that they are always being occupied.
I think I want to add to that, like the flexibility there is such a key when you're first starting. Yeah. So we reestablished all of our leadership roles, which like had changed when I restarted with our one member, because we added the coalition. Like that was a thing that we established in the very first year, was creating our coalition. And so those were leadership roles that we added. And then we were like, we need a person who's doing like social. And then we realized that social, we were treating it like communications, and we really should actually establish that. So we created a communications chair, and then we added a social committee, which is now the events committee, right? Like, so know that as your organization grows, which you will see huge ebbs and flows. So don't be freaked out when like in 2021, you're like not seeing a ton of people, because in 2022, you're going to see it pick up again. And then 2023 is going to drop. And then like, it's just kind of this ongoing with the election cycle. I mean, I guess I don't know. Do you guys have your gubernatorials like in like the 2 years in between? Basically know your election cycles. I just realized I was talking about Texas election cycles. I didn't know if I was talking about Oklahoma election cycles, but like, don't be freaked out by that. But I think like providing for some flexibility, also knowing what your situation is if you are sponsored. So I know that for Oklahoma votes, it's your leadership starts with fellows who are chosen by the center, and though they're actually paid positions. At Texas Votes, we do elections, and we do elections for like we call them our exec team, at the end of the spring, so they have all summer to get prepared. But we also know, especially because we bring so many freshmen in, and I think this actually might also be very helpful at a community college to do as well, is we have our secondary leadership positions elected in the very beginning of the fall, so that our freshmen can like jump right in. And the other thing we do with elections, which is different from a lot of other organizations, is there's no campaigning, because we have seen how really absolutely toxic that crap can be. And we decided like, nope, we're not going to have like undercover groups like making people look bad, because ultimately we want everyone to be super happy and functioning well here. So we have everyone fill out an application. The questions are agreed upon now by our alumni. As the graduate coordinator, I was the one who created them originally, but now that we have been keeping a hold of our alumni and staying in contact with them, they help us with that process. And basically you read their application, and they can run for actually more than one position too. So we want to make sure people who really wanted to be involved, like really, really wanted to be involved, had a higher opportunity of getting to be in a position. And so, that no campaigning was maybe one of the single most important things that we did to keep our atmosphere super healthy as an organization. And we have a ton of committees that are not in our constitution because we want those to be completely flexible. And so we didn't start adding committees until a few years in, when we were like, oh, we're getting big. But as we've put them in, we have a committee for STEM, because from looking at our NSOLVE data, which I think Adam talked to you guys about earlier, we know our STEM students have the lowest turnout rate on campus. So a STEM committee is all about trying to get STEM students to turn out to vote. We have an events committee, a fundraising committee, and then we just added a digital committee this year. And adding it was as simple as someone saying, can we have a committee on this? And we're like, do you want to be in charge of it? And she was like, yeah. And we're like, okay, go for it. And that was because of COVID-19 and everything having to go digital. And so it's actually turning out to be like maybe one of the most important, definitely the most important committee that we're dealing with right now. And I have a feeling it might stick. But we also had like a rebranding committee. Oh, this might be helpful in general to know. Fun fact, using your university's name or initials in the title of your organization may not be the best idea in the world. So we were originally UT Votes, which meant
we were originally OU Votes.
Yeah. And so for our situations are similar but different. My situation was anytime I wanted to have anything printed with UT Votes, it had to go through UT's licensing. Nightmare. That takes weeks to do. You can't like try to get a t-shirt printed. It was a nightmare. OK Votes didn't, or Oklahoma Votes could not get permission at all to use OU in their name from licensing. So like just a heads up on that.
Check with people before you decide on something.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be great. And then, just don't get too married to a name, because you never know when licensing can make your life awful. But yeah, sorry, that was off topic, but also I think a really important note to add.
Even if you're like with a national organization, like Voto Latino, we couldn't say OU Voto Latino. They said we had to say Voto Latino at OU.
Yeah.
So even if you're like under an organization, like asking them like what's the correct terminology in terms of like how we present ourselves is really important too.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that these.
Oh, you're good.
We're on here. Actually, I do want to add that, like, who is missing from the conversation? I think also this is also like an equity and inclusion issue, right? So if you are a four-year campus that has a lot of commuter students, and you are not like doing something to be sure commuter students are included in your committee, like, fix it. If you are a campus with like, for us, it's a really, really large population of Asian American students, and like you're not seeing that in your representation in your leadership, that's probably a problem, right? So I just wanted to put that out into the world.
So also coming along with an organization is writing a constitution. We recommend you look up outlines online. There are so many. You can just like spend hours scrolling through some. But they're taking a moment to look online and then finding out if there are any like specific like requirements. Like for OU specifically, we have to have like I think it's like a hazing policy in our constitution, and then something about like not discriminating against members and like people who want to be part of the organization. And so finding out like what are the specific things that I have to have in this constitution, and then molding it around like what you actually want to include. And then don't be afraid to ask other student organizations on your campus for their constitution. Like I did that with some that had nothing to do with civic engagement, but the stuff that they had, I was like, oh, that's good. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Also, if you guys wanted to see, sorry, he got carried away with my keyboard. If you guys wanted to see ours, specifically like what we have for nonpartisanship, I would also be happy to include that. So what was interesting for us is a lot of our nonpartisanship stuff wasn't officially written into our constitution. It was just kind of hearsay. And so we have a nonpartisanship committee, also not a bad thing to have when you're like, is this going to be partisan ? We take it to the committee. And they decided to write up quite a few amendments to put into our constitution on nonpartisanship. And if you ever wanted to look at those, I'd be happy to share. Some of it's like, don't wear our t-shirt to an event for your party, which was a thing that we had to write after someone got like a picture was taken, publicly posted in a newspaper of someone wearing our t-shirt at a Young Democrats event for the state of Texas. And we're like, oh no, like, I'm glad that you're involved, but like, dude. So we're gonna go over some recruitment strategies with you. The first one that I think ultimately was the most important for Texas votes was orientation. For us, our orientation takes place over the summer, and like you get to be at a table, and it used to be out from like 1 to 3 every Tuesday afternoon. I've never sweat so much in my entire life, but we were there and we recruited. Like our first meeting last year, we had 160 people come to our first meeting. Which is not how many people we had in our org, but like our brains all kind of collectively exploded from all the returning members who were like, what's going on? Do you want to talk about social media?
Yeah. So for social media, I think it's becoming more and more increasingly important in terms of like recruiting people. So the brand that you create for yourself online, whether that's like through Instagram or Twitter or through like a Facebook page, is what people are going to be seeing firsthand. So with Voto Latino and with like Oklahoma Votes, we really thought about like, okay, we want our logo on everything. So if people share stuff, they know who we are, they know how to get back to us. That kind of stuff is like stuff you don't really think about until you see other organizations doing it. And so I really recommend like you start thinking about like what you want your social media to look like. I never thought about this before, and it sounds like the wildest thing, but our PR chair for VL, she had a specific filter that she created on Visco that she would put on every single every single post, regardless of what the post was, what the lighting was. She would put it on every single post, and it made our Instagram page look so cohesive. Like it looked like we had like a whole on like branding team that was doing our social media. And so stuff like little stuff like that is stuff that you might not think about, but it really will impact like when people go onto your page and they're like, oh, like this organization, I like what I'm seeing. They start scrolling through your page. They're going to become more interested. They might even DM you. If you can add a link to your page, I recommend creating like an interest form, like a Google form, like that's just like has your logo on it, and it has like how to get in contact with people, like email, first, last name, phone number, maybe. Like that's super simple, and you'd be surprised how many responses you get from the people that are visiting your pages. And you can also make your social media accounts like business accounts. So on Instagram, you can do like a business account where you add contact information. So you can add your email, and then you can see how people interact with your post, and you can see, okay, we had 66 people share this post. So like we should keep doing stuff like this. Like for Oklahoma Votes, we put out information about the election, this past election that happened, and the amount of people that shared our information was insane. Like when we looked at the insights for the specific posts, like we were like, okay, we need to put more information out like this, as opposed to some of the stuff that we were doing beforehand. So there's a lot of crafting you can do with social media, and the people that will end up like following your account, if they like what they see. So that's definitely an aspect that I think it's important to care about, and important to put the right people in those positions as well.
I'm going to add, as your organization starts creating more and more content that's important for students, or different like things that people may want to do with your organization, Linktree has become like our best friend. Some of you guys know what it is, but on our Linktree, we have, you know, do you want to become a member? Here's how. Here's the link to our next Facebook or a Facebook event for our next meeting. We have how to make a donation, because we're starting to get people who like know nothing about us seeing our page. We may as well ask them for money, because you never know how to get funding. That funding is a hard part of this. And then we also have like, here are some videos we've made on how to register to vote. Here are some videos we've made walking you through how to make a request for an absentee ballot. Stuff like that, which has actually come in super handy, and are actually some of our most clicked on links are the how-tos that we redirect people to. There was one other thing I wanted to add to that, and I forget what it is. Oh, getting people to share what you posted. The other thing I wanted to add is, as you become recognized by more and more folks on your campus, we now have the College of Liberal Arts, which is one of the largest colleges on our campus, consistently sharing any of our informational Instagram posts. So if we have an Instagram post that's like, hey, you have 10 more days until you need to be registered to vote, or else you can't vote in the next election, they share that. And so, and then we always write back like, thank you for sharing. And I think that now like we have a cute little friendship happening, and that's happening with a few at nursing college as well. So that's starting to happen with different colleges. And so those friendships are super important. And also don't feel that like, if there are organizations that are similar to theirs, especially if you do decide to build a coalition and they're your coalition members, we also raise up what they do, because then they see us doing that for them and they reciprocate.
To add to that, with Voto Latino, something that we saw is like the more information that we put out there that was relevant to what students needed to know in terms of like elections and stuff like that. We were surprised at some of the organizations that started sharing our information, because it was good information. Like we had been trying to build a relationship with college Republicans and young Democrats on campus, and it was harder to reach some of them. And next thing you know, they started sharing our stuff on social media, and we built a relationship that way. They would like DM us and be like, we love the work that you're doing. And so you like, people will start to notice, and it'll be like, it'll help build more people into the coalition eventually too.
The goal of recruitment is to increase membership. And so the other thing is, you need to think about if you want to have a membership period that you see a lot of like Greek life doing, or if you want to invite people to join whenever you want them to, or whenever they want to. And so if you are an organization that allows people to join whenever they want to join, make sure that's common knowledge. So right now, we decided just to continue having meetings over the summer because we had a runoff election in July. And so we actually have incoming freshmen who haven't stepped foot on campus yet, and may actually not step campus on for a good semester. who are already participating in our organization and coming to our Zoom meetings, which Zoom has gone like pretty well actually. And we had already started using it for some of our leadership meetings because frankly, none of us wanted to come back to campus on like a Monday night at 8 o'clock to talk. And we're like, we're gonna do this online. And so that helps us get new members, is what I found, because people will come up and say like, oh, what you're doing so cool. And I'm like, our meeting is on Thursday at 7 at like Below, come hang out with us. And they're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, there's gonna be pizza. So make sure you sign up like right now, because you get to design your own pizza, which is also a thing that gets more people to come, because we have a good partnership with a pizza place that we can make pizzas with. And like, that's another way that we recruit, is just through our tabling. Like tabling isn't just voter registration. It's also encouraging people to come hang out with us and come learn more about what we're doing.
So meetings, when you are thinking about like, okay, now we kind of have an established organization, now we have to start having meetings. So leadership team meetings, so those are going to be like your chairs, like for the organizations I've been a part of, that could be anything from like the vice chair of like programming, vice chair of like outreach, whoever needs to be in on those conversations. And then executive team meetings, which typically will include committee members and just like everyone who is working to meet the goal of your organization. And then general body meetings are all examples of meetings. So for Voto Latino, we had general body meetings once a month where the entire community was welcome to come. We always had free food. So we always had great attendance because of the food. And we would promote the food like ahead of time too. And it was always like staple foods in like the Hispanic community. So that like hot Cheetos and cheese, like we attracted so many people with doing stuff like that, where we would update the community on what we've been doing, ways that they can get involved, ways they can volunteer. Through Voto Latino, we offered a lot of volunteer opportunities so that people didn't feel like they had to become a member to still feel like they're a part of the organization. And then another thing with meetings is always have an agenda. Regardless of, like for general body meetings, I created an agenda for myself as chair, like so that I knew like what the schedule of events was and what needed to happen. But agendas are really crucial because it's gonna make, when people come to your meeting, it's gonna make them feel like their time isn't being wasted and that there's actually stuff that they need to get to, they need to do. And creating them with enough enough time ahead of a meeting is also really important, because sometimes you might create an agenda and you're going to realize that there's not a lot that you need to cover. So there's no point in asking people to stay on campus for a meeting or coming back to campus. And so I think that goes along with like being respectful of people's time. That's when like, as a college student, you're super busy all the time and you have schoolwork and stuff you need to do. So finding out when it's necessary to have a meeting, because sometimes it's not always necessary to have meetings. And then strive for consistency. So try to have your meetings as frequently as possible, or schedule like a time that's going to work best for your team, whether that's on a bi-weekly basis or on a weekly basis. I did my best to try to not cancel meetings unless there was absolutely nothing that we needed to talk about. But I think it helps people still feel like they're a part of an organization and that they're doing work within the organization. Because if you are canceling meetings all the time, or you have a meeting like once a month, like you're not going to have people be as committed as opposed to having a meeting on a bi-weekly or weekly basis. And then also, like I said before, just be respectful of people's times. Meetings are a time for business, but also don't forget to check in on your team, whether that's starting off a meeting with an icebreaker or highs and lows, and just like asking people how they've been doing. One of the biggest things that for my leadership team meetings that I did with Voto Latino was I told my vice chairs, our leadership team meetings are not a time to plan. They're a time for you to check in and be like, this is what I'm doing, any feedback, because those times are supposed to be times with committee members. And so also like setting how, like what the expectations are for every single meeting is going to help them run smoothly and allow more time for like check-ins and bonding opportunities within your team too.
So we have
to add.
We have about 9 minutes left, so I'm going to do these next two pieces super duper fast because I have done them a couple times, so I know how to fly through them, because I want to leave like 5 minutes for you guys just to like feedback and ask us any more questions. So when it comes to programming, everybody kind of tables. If you have questions about tabling, set up a time to talk with me one-on-one and I can walk you through some of that. Keep it simple, keep it easy. And then other events I want you guys to know about. National Voter Registration Day is like an easy day to plug into. If you Google it, there's going to be a sign up form. It's part of the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. It's super rad. I highly recommend participating in it. It's probably our second highest day of registrations, unless we happen to be doing like 300 to 400 person classes in a day, which happens sometimes and is a lot. But the other one that I wanted to point out, which is new, is a Vote Early Day. Do you guys have early voting in Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay. It's on Vote Early Day is on a Saturday. And so I just want to raise that up. We're pretty pumped about it because if you look at your install data, you can see how many students vote early. And for us, 70 to 75% of UT students vote early. That's a very important number because when you see students waiting in line for 3 to 4 hours on election day, there's a problem. And so push early voting all that you can. And that Vote Early Day, both of those are opportunities potentially for like a little bit of funding for events. You'd have to figure out how you're doing it digitally if you guys aren't doing stuff on campus. And that's a decision your organization needs to be making right now, is like Texas Votes has decided that we're not meeting in person in the fall semester, that like we have too many people who are immunocompromised to put people in that position. Coalition building is like a thing. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. But I'm not going to talk about it in length, except to say that when you're building a coalition, the ideal for the coalition is to make the lift super low. So at Texas, our coalition is you have one representative who comes to a coalition meeting once per semester. Do that more or less, depending on what you want for your campus. That representative then ensures that every eligible student in your organization gets registered to vote and shares information like important election dates, where to find good information about what's on your ballot, stuff like that. That's like the entirety of belonging to our coalition. I must also add that our coalition is unique, that it's only student organizations. So we don't have institutional buy-in at UT. It's like starting to happen a teeny tiny bit, but like the reality is that our Board of Regents is appointed by our governor, and our governor doesn't like Austin, is pretty public about that. And also is extremely public about that. I think that's like not a bold statement for me to make at all, actually. There are some interesting op-eds on that. But also they're not like super hyped about students being engaged in politics and stuff. So everything that we do is very student driven. There are other campuses where that coalition is made up of a lot of people higher up and institutionally. And if that's the case, that's cool. But my argument is that students should always be involved in that coalition no matter what. Because what you're doing is for students, and if you're not including student voices, then you're doing it wrong. I have very, very deep, strong feelings about this. So if you are building a coalition similar to ours at UT, which is all student driven, we don't say you have to be political to join. So like we have 3 a cappella groups in our coalition. And the cool part about that, or like we have an Indian pop dance group that's in our coalition. And the cool thing about that is we do an event on the last day to register to vote. That's like where we do our most registration every year or every election cycle. And Punjabawakis, which is that Indian pop dance group, came out and did a tutorial on how like to do some of their dances and published that on social media, getting people to come out. So people came to that event to learn how to do the dance and then stayed to get registered to vote. And that's like exactly what you want to see, because we know STEM students, particularly our Asian American students, are turning out to vote at very low rates at UT. And so that helps us gain access to them. So think about who's missing from your space, and think about when you look at your install data, who is not like getting what they need in order to be active citizens, and use your coalition to target those folks first, but also to create a really nice collaborative atmosphere for those organizations who are already doing it. So like I was saying, our UDEMs and College Republicans come to that meeting. And so that's my quick version of that. And then finally, and I think we totally agree on this, be patient, be kind to yourself as you're doing this work. Texas Votes did not grow to what it is overnight. This is my 6th year of involvement with them, so I'm still a student member until I hopefully graduate at the end of this semester. And it was a lot of hard work by a lot of people. So you have to do a lot, especially for those of you who, I'm assuming, Ryan, you're probably going to be out after a year now, and going whatever you want to do after you finish at your community college. Like, how do you set this up to be successful for the people who come after you? So I tried doing that with my student newspaper that I was at in undergrad, and then it collapsed like 3 generations after me. And so you have to think about what do you have to put in place for that. So some of that is institutional support. Yeah. So it sounds like you guys both have good institutional buy-in. So having someone who will say this is important to us, and then having a strong constitution and setting up expectations for people and like how to recruit, making it all super easy. Don't make someone recreate the wheel. Write up what you're doing as you're doing it so they can do it again later. Mm-hmm. We have 3 minutes. I'm out of breath from talking so fast. So I'm sorry if you didn't catch anything. Do you guys have any questions for us?
I guess I have one question. So I guess earlier on, I mean, before all this, I was kind of thinking more of like a civic engagement organization as opposed to like one specifically done for voting. Are there any advantages to doing one specifically for voting, or like have you seen like just general civic engagement projects be successful, or are those like kind of too broad to succeed almost?
It depends on how many people you have to be in your organization. Ultimately, a lot of civic engagement work starts with voter engagement because that's kind of like at the very basic piece. Mm-hmm. And we keep trying to include more and more civic engagement because that's what we want it to be. We want it to be broad civic engagement. But we're so consumed with voter registration because, you know, like I had a week where I did like I personally did 22 classrooms in 1 week. And that was just me. Like I know that our president did almost as many, except that I didn't have class because I was on like dissertation. So I didn't have to schedule around classes. I think we had like easily over 100 classes in 1 week, a couple of times. And so a lot of it comes down to capacity.
Yeah. Also just thinking about like, you can easily do like a civic engagement organization, like a broad civic engagement organization, and have voting at the center of it. Mm-hmm. I would say that's how Voto Latino was for us. Like we had a vice chair for research, which was something that nobody on our campus had seen before. And so every month we put out newsletters about just like information that students might want to know about. And we'd also include fun things like random cooking recipes or stuff like that. But that's like an entire committee of people who are focusing on like voter education and information about candidates. Like they would email candidates and be like, we have these questions that students want to know. And then they would post those in the newsletter. Mm-hmm. And so that is a little bit different than just like registering people to vote. So I definitely think that you can do that work and keep like voter registration at the center, so that like if and when you don't have enough people, like you can remove those committees or like those specific like chairs, but keeping voter registration at the center of it.
Yeah, I think it's just like largely stating what your goals are. Like one of my goals is for Texas Votes to be the host of deliberative dialogues on our campus. And so it's just like this very long-term goal because we need to get everyone trained and we need to find time for people to do that. So there's no way that's going to be happening during like right before an election. So it'll be like what we do in our off cycles. Right. But everyone's like hit the ground tired by the end of an election. So I think also it's really, 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 really important that you're acknowledging when people need help. Because these are the kinds of people who are going to, all of us, I can easily say are the kinds of people who will overexert themselves. And I'm gonna be super frank and say I've had 2 presidents of my organization institutionalized for mental reasons, and you know that was devastating. And it wasn't our fault, but we were one of the pieces where they pushed themselves too far. So if you see yourself in kind of an advisory role, or if you are the person making things happen, like do some internal checks with yourself or do some checks with your students. I like just told people to stop. I was like, you need to give yourself a break. I'm cutting you off for a day or 2. And something simple like that, but just like freaking breathe. I think all of my information Lauren has shared in the stuff. So please feel free to reach out to me, you guys. This was fun.
Yeah. Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you. Good luck.
Thanks.
Yes. Best of luck. I'm sure it'll be great.
Hopefully.
So are y'all moving back on campus or online? Because we're moving back.
We're moving back too.
We're hybrid at UT.
Oh yeah, we're hybrid at UT.
Bad in Austin, so.
Pretty much same. So.
I feel like we're going to end up moving online though.
Yeah, there's a lot of schools that I've seen that have already started, like, have already announced they're going to move.
Yeah. OU says we're going to start in person, and they, like, have already moved some classes online, but I don't know if it's going to stick. I just feel like the dorms is like the bad, like I don't know how that's going to work. I was an RA, and like when it was flu season, if one person got sick, the entire floor was sick. I don't know how they're going to prevent something like coronavirus spreading in the dorms. So we'll see.
Okay, so I think it's time to turn to the main session. What's your little
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and our slides are in the they're in the drive if you need them. Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For their campuses. So it's going to be kind of a really